Hi, this is Professor Favors with American Literature. So today's lesson is on Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, and we are only going to look at stanzas 1 to 20. So make sure to have your document out. You can access it online. The Song of Myself, if you type it in as a research target, you should find a PDF. For my class, however, you do have access to a link. So this is American Literature, Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, stanzas 1 to 20. So this lesson is subject to fair use because I am including the 20 stanzas within this presentation, but it is for teaching purposes. So um, there are also pics, two pics of Walt Whitman as well. So this is subject to fair use. All right, so let's look at Walt Whitman. His date ranges 1819 to 1892. And so here's a picture of him. And I'm just going to read this slide and the next slide. The second of 9 children and born in 1819 to a Long Island farmer and carpenter, Walt Whitman is both the journeyman poet of Americanness and its champion. A journalist and newspaper editor throughout his life, Whitman worked as a law clerk, a school teacher, a printer, a civil servant, and a hospital aide, but he was always writing. From his teenage years until his death, his byline was on constant view. Contemporary reports suggest that Whitman was an industrious worker, but that he was often accused of idleness because his habit of long midday walks contrasted sharply with 19th century attitudes toward work. In Song of Myself, Whitman addressed these critics directly by writing, I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. So the purpose of us only looking at 1 through 20, even though 21 through 52 might have the answer that we need. The only reason why we want to look at only 1 through 20 for Song of Myself is this idea here where Whitman is addressing his critics. He is being accused of idleness. He's being accused of idleness. Song of Myself is him addressing the critics. They're saying in a time of change, in a time of industry, in a time of work is important to us. 19th century attitudes towards work. He is being idle. So then the 52 stanza Song of Myself is his response to the critics. And that's why we're only going to look at 1 through 20 because 1 through 20 really gives us what we need. Okay. So when you are reading the 20 stanzas, Song of Myself, understand that everything that he is saying, line by line, stanza by stanza, is in a response to the critics who say he's idle within the context of 19th century attitudes toward work. All right, so for Whitman, too much industry dulled the ability to celebrate the ordinary. In the preface to the first edition of Leaves of Grass in 1855, Whitman expounds on his love for the common. Other states indicate themselves in their deputies, but the genius of the United States is not best or most in its executives or legislators, nor in its ambassadors or authors or colleges or churches or parlors, nor even in its newspapers or inventors, but always most in the common people. Whitman's love for the common people that he encountered and observed in the urban centers of the North is expressed in all his poetry. If his British contemporary Alfred Lord Tennyson is the national poet of mourning, then Whitman is the national poet of celebration. So, what you see here with Whitman, too much industry, too much industry dulled the ability to celebrate the ordinary. Every day there is a ordinary experience. And what he's suggesting here that all of these people who are about industry, and call it genius, right? So these are the folks who are business executives. These are the folks who are state, federal legislators. These are some of the people who are ambassadors, authors, colleges, churches, parlors, even newspapers or inventors. These are the people who are so busy with industry, and there's nothing wrong with industry in a sense that you still need to put your hands to work. But he was saying that people spent too much time in industry to the point that they missed the commonness of people, everyday ordinary living. And so again, Song of Myself is a response to the critics that you are spending too much time in industry. You're not celebrating the ordinary. You're calling yourself genius because of all these different categories, right? It's like a person listing all of their accomplishments on their resume. You do this, you do this, you do this, but there's some aspect of your life that you are missing out on. And that's what he wants to call attention to. All right, so let's look at some historical implications. Remember from the introductory PowerPoint lesson to the course um, on time periods, that every time you see something in terms of a time period 1819 to 1892, his his birth and death dates, and that's the 19th century. You want to look at what was going on during that time. Now, there's a lot more that's going on. I just only put here the most necessary, but let's look at it. So, 1819, we have the Panic of 1819, which is a financial crisis. Somewhere between here, we also had another financial crisis, somewhere like 1837. Thomas Jefferson founds the University of Virginia. So then we have different states becoming states, or different territories becoming states. So Maine and Missouri becoming a state. Florida becomes a U.S. territory. We also have Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, the presidents, dying on the same day, and then Andrew Jackson becoming president. We have Nat Turner's revolt, also slavery debates. We have Oberlin College beginning enrolling female students. This is a change in the dynamic of all men being able to go to college, right? And many of the institutions having to create uh, separate institutions for women, separate institutions for Black Americans. And so you're going to see this again in your final paper for this course on single sex colleges. And the title of that is Are Single Sex Colleges Obsolete? And so then 1845, we have Florida and Texas becoming states. Then we have the Mexican American War. What is interesting here is 1857 is kind of like a current issue that's going on today. But this was Dred Scott v. Sanford, and he sued based on the idea that he was free from slavery. And so slaves and blacks, um, the conclusion of the suit, the judge's decision, slaves and blacks descended from slaves were not American citizens and cannot sue. So then later we ended up having Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves, Reconstruction era, assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Then the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal protection under the law, meaning that we're not necessarily equal. It's a citizenship amendment, but it basically means that it's equal application of the law. So if men can go to college, women can go to college. If white people can go to college, black people can go to college. So it's equal application of the law. So now this is the industry aspect of um, Whitman's critique. 1865 to 1913, these were two major industrial revolutions. Then there was a global transition towards manufacturing, technological improvements, rapid economic growth in these areas here. So during the 19th century, where there's a heavy attitude towards work and industry, within this context here of the 19th century, we have critics who are criticizing Walt Whitman that he's not industrious enough. And so keep this in mind as we go through all the different slides. So we're looking at the immediate text. Whenever you want to look at a literary work, you look at the immediate text. You don't go and find um, secondary source material to try to understand the text itself. You want to take some time to learn how to look at the text yourself, and that's what we're going to do. All right, stanza 8, the indifference. Indifference essentially you don't love or hate something, right? I did say earlier that it could be hate, uh, represent hate, but a lot of times it's you don't feel one way or the other towards something, right? You're not really choosing. So let's look at the stanza. And there is another stanza for 8 as well. The little one sleeps in his cradle. I lift the gauze and look a long time and silently brush away flies with my hand. The youngster and the red-faced girl turn aside up the bushy hill. I peeringly view them from the top. The suicide sprawls on the bloody floor of the bedroom. I witness the corpse with its dabbled hair. I note where the pistol has fallen. The blab of the pave, tires of carts, slough of boot soles, talk of the promenaders, the heavy omnibus, the driver with his interrogating thumb, the clink of the shod horses on the granite floor, the snow sleighs, clinking shouted jokes, pelts of snowballs, the hurrahs for popular favorites, the fury of roused mobs, the flap of the curtain, litter a sick man inside borne to the hospital. Uh, what this reminds me of is witnessing the effects of war, witnessing a war, witnessing the effect of war. The little one sleeps in his cradle is sort of like a loss of innocence and um, among this chaos here. Uh, Gauze always refers to medical gauze, right? I look a long time, silently brush the flies with my hand. So silently brushing away flies with my hand, meaning that um, the skin is infected, uh, probably rotting away. The youngster and the red faced girl, red face probably refers um, to Native American, turned upside the bushy hill. I peeringly view from the top the suicide sprawls on the bloody floor of the bedroom. So we have a reference to death, death by suicide. I witnessed a corpse with this dabbled hair. So now we know that we can confirm that it's actually death. And I know where the pistol has fallen, meaning that person who killed himself or herself committed suicide. The blab of the paved, tires of cars, slough of boot soles, talk of the promenaders, the heavy omnibus, the driver with his interrogating thumb, the clank of the shod horses, snow sleighs, shouted jokes, the hurrahs for popular favorites, and then the flap of the curtain, litter a sick man inside borne to the hospital. Okay, so we have here what I be- what I believe some sort of tragedy or tragic elements. Suicide as a choice is referenced in here. That means that's death of the self. If that's death of the self in a literal sense, then it is contrasted with Whitman's poem when he's singing of himself. The poem is titled "Song of Myself." So we have here a contrast with a person committing suicide using a pistol, and that's death of the self, and that's contrasted with um, Whitman singing of himself throughout this poem. Okay, the meeting of enemies, the sudden oath, the blows and fall, the excited crowd, the policeman with his star quickly working his passage through the center of the crowd, the impassive stones that receive and return so many echoes, what groans of overfed or half starved who fall sunstruck or in fits, what exclamations of women taken suddenly who hurry home and give birth to babes. What living and buried speech is always vibrating here, what howls restrained by decorum, arrests of criminals, slights, adulterers, offers made, acceptances, rejections with convex lips. I mind them, or the show or resonance of them. I come and depart. Pay attention to that. So, stanza 8 is giving you the policeman who has now come to figure out what happened to the person who committed suicide. And so we have an excited crowd here. We have impassive stones, what groans, what explanations of women take. But he's also talking about how life still goes on, because these are women taken suddenly who hurry home and give birth to babes, or what living and buried speech is always vibrating here, what howls trained by decorum. Arrests of criminals continues, slice, adulterers offers, acceptances, rejections, convicts, that still goes on. But what he's saying here, I mind them, or the show of resonance of them, okay, there's that or again, okay, so I either mind them or the show or resonance of them. Okay, this one or is the only or that's necessary. Okay, so I mind them or the show of resonance of them. But for him, which is interesting, is that I come and I depart. I come and I depart, meaning that he's not doing anything to help. He's not going to make a contribution. It's just like he's peering, he's almost like he's watching TV. I see something, but there isn't anything in here that basically says that he's going to do any help, because the and here um, refers to both, right? I come and I depart. I don't need to stay here to figure out what went on. I got a clue about it, and I mind it. I see what's going on. It's part of life. It's part of the way things are done. And now I'm going to leave. So I could mind it or show the resonant or the I mind them or the show or resonance of them, and then based upon that decision, I come and I depart. All right, so here's some resources, research archives, and educational information. So Walt Whitman Birthplace Association website, then research archives list of links you can find on that website. Some are good links and some are not. So I added a Walt Whitman archive link here, and then of course the source pit. All right. Thank you very much for listening.